It started with silence, too clean, too practiced. The ER doors slid open and 3 men in plain clothes walked in like they owned the building. No uniforms, no noise, just eyes that measured exits, cameras, and people. One of them flashed a badge at the charge desk, CID, and pointed down the hall. "We need the nurse from Trauma 2. Now." In Trauma 2, nurse Lena Qureshi was wiping blood off her hands, calm under harsh fluorescent light, ignored the way nurses like her always were. The detective didn't ask her name, he didn't ask permission. He said, "You were with the patient before he coded. Tell me what you saw." Behind him, a hospital security guard hesitated, then stepped aside. Lena looked at the detective's badge, then at the man on the gurney who wasn't supposed to be dead yet. Her gaze moved to the computer. She pulled up the patient's file, and her face didn't change. Only her voice did. Quiet, controlled. "Your report won't match this record," she said. And in that moment, the room shifted. They had brought CID into her hospital to break her. They didn't understand they had walked into the one place she couldn't let them lie. The emergency department looked clean from the outside. Inside, it was never clean. It was bright and sharp, and loud in ways people didn't notice until they were stuck in it. Fluorescent lights that didn't forgive, plastic chairs that held fear like a smell, the constant thin music of monitors that never stopped. The waiting area was full. It always was. A child coughed into a sleeve. A man argued with a receptionist about a bill. Someone in the corner vomited quietly into a bag without making a scene, as if even sickness understood the rules here. Behind the triage desk, Lena Qureshi moved like she belonged to the place and didn't belong to it at all. She was in standard Navy scrubs. Her hair was pinned back, no loose strands. A hospital ID card that had been bent and reclipped so many times the plastic had gone cloudy. Nothing about her drew attention. Not her posture, not her voice. She didn't announce herself when she entered a room, didn't demand space when she needed it. She simply took it the way water takes a shape. People noticed the loud ones in the ER. The doctors who barked orders like they were in charge of the building. The paramedics who kicked doors open. The security guards who wanted everyone to know they could handle a situation. They didn't notice Lena, not properly. They relied on her without thinking about it. She was the one who had IV access before the physician finished the first sentence. She was the one who had the patient's allergies and meds ready when someone asked, "Do we know anything about this guy?" She was the one who documented every change, every time, even when nobody cared. And when chaos shifted, as it always did, she shifted with it, quietly. A trauma pager went off above her head. Trauma 2, ETA 4 min, multiple injuries. A nurse across from her swore under her breath and shoved her chair back. A junior doctor, new enough to still look shocked by the sound of sirens, snapped a glove onto his hand too hard and tore it. Lena didn't react to the alarm. She already had her hands moving. She checked the airway cart without looking like she was checking it. She replaced 2 missing syringes and didn't say anything. She confirmed suction. She made sure the crash cart was sealed. Her eyes tracked what mattered: oxygen, access, blood products, lines. The charge nurse, Miriam, glanced at Lena and nodded once, an unspoken assignment. Lena stepped into Trauma 2, her shoes squeaking briefly on the polished floor. The room smelled like disinfectant and old adrenaline. She set up the bed, strapped the monitor leads, positioned the overhead light. She placed a fresh pack of chest tubes within reach and kept her face blank, as if it was normal to prepare for someone's worst day in silence. The doors burst open with the paramedics. "Male, late 30s, one of them called out, voice clipped. "Single vehicle collision, found unresponsive. Hypotensive, tachy, suspected internal bleed. Pupils equal, no obvious head trauma. We got him breathing but he's shallow." The gurney rolled in fast. The patient looked too clean for an accident. That was the first thought Lena didn't allow to show. His shirt was torn but not dirty. His hair was neat, even damped down like he'd just left a shower. There were superficial cuts on his forehead, blood thin and controlled, nothing like the mess she'd seen after real collisions. His wrists showed bruising, faint, circular marks like pressure, like restraints, like someone had held him down. The paramedic kept talking. The doctor started shouting for blood. Lena leaned over the patient and placed 2 fingers against his carotid. "Weak," Fast, real. She inserted an IV with a single clean motion, no hesitation. Another nurse struggled with the opposite arm, vein collapsing, patient dehydrated, shock setting in. Lena didn't look up. Left AC is good, she said softly. 18 gauge. Her voice didn't compete with the noise. It didn't have to. It was heard anyway. The junior doctor, Dr. Sod, barely out of residency, leaned over her shoulder. What's his name? The paramedic shook his head. No ID, found alone. They called him John Doe like they always did. But when Lena lifted the patient's hand to place the pulse oximeter, she saw the underside of his fingers. A faint smear, dark and metallic, like ink or grease, half cleaned away. Not blood, something else. She filed it away without changing her breathing. Pressure's falling, someone said. 2 units O negative, Dr. Sod ordered, too loudly, as if volume could control physiology. Lena hung fluids, adjusted the oxygen. She watched the patient's chest rise and fall, shallow and quick, as if he was trying to run while lying still. A monitor alarmed. Heart rate climbed. Blood pressure dropped again. A senior doctor arrived. Doctor Hamid, older, tired-eyed, the kind of man who had seen too much and protected himself by acting like nothing surprised him. What happened? He asked, already scanning the room. Car crash, Dr. Sod replied, relieved to hand authority upward. Doctor Hamid glanced at the patient's injuries, then at the paramedics. Seatbelt? The paramedics hesitated. Not sure. Lena watched that hesitation the way she watched a tremor in a hand, small, telling. Fast scan, Dr. Hamid said. Now, gel hit skin. The ultrasound probe pressed down. Lena held the patient's shoulder steady, and for a moment the patient's eyes opened, just a crack. His gaze found her, not the doctor's, not the lights, not pleading. Focused. He tried to speak, but only air came out. Lena leaned closer, just enough to hear without making it a performance. His lips moved once barely. File, he breathed. Then his eyes rolled back. The monitor flattened into a long, unforgiving tone. Code, someone shouted. The room tightened. Compression started. Drugs drawn up. Somebody slammed a hand down on the crash cart as if anger could restart a heart. Lena moved into position at the patient's head, not asking for permission, not waiting for a command. She secured the airway support and watched the rhythm. She watched the hands doing compressions and counted the depth and rate without moving her lips. She made 2 small adjustments, quiet, clinical, that improved the effectiveness. No announcement, no lecture, just correction. After 2 minutes, Dr. Hamid called, pulse check. Silence, nothing. Again. They worked him, 3 minutes. 4. Lena's gaze flicked once to the wall clock. Time wasn't dramatic to her. It was just a weapon that belonged to physiology. Then the monitor twitched. A rhythm tried to return, weak, ugly, but present. Got something, someone said, relief leaking into their tone. Dr. Hamid nodded sharply. Keep him alive, ICU, now. They stabilized, taped lines, moved fast. As they rolled him out, Lena stepped back and peeled off her gloves. Blood had splashed her wrist, leaving a crescent mark where the latex ended. She cleaned it carefully, not because she was squeamish, because she was controlled. Outside Trauma 2, the hallway looked ordinary again. Nurses walked past with charts. A janitor pushed a mop bucket. The hospital swallowed the crisis like it swallowed everything. Miriam approached, eyes narrowed. You okay? Lena gave a simple nod. He wasn't supposed to be alone. Miriam frowned. What? Lena didn't answer. She didn't explain what she'd noticed. The restraint marks, the cleaned injuries, the way the paramedic hesitated, the word the patient had forced out like it mattered more than breath. Instead, she walked to the nearest workstation. She logged in. She opened the patient's electronic chart. Name, John Doe, unknown, unidentified. She began documenting the timeline exactly as it happened. Arrival time, vitals, interventions, changes in status. Every dose, every fluid, every event. She typed fast but never sloppy. And then she saw something that made her stop. A note already existed in the chart, entered 3 minutes before the patient arrived. A brief line, clinically formatted, patient stable on arrival, no signs of restraint or foul play. Lena stared at it. Her face didn't change. She clicked the audit trail. The entry was signed by an account she recognized, not a doctor, not a nurse. An admin login tied to hospital IT. She didn't speak, she didn't call anyone over. She didn't show Miriam. She reached into the printer tray and pulled out a blank sheet. Then she printed the audit log. 1 page, 2, 3. She collected them, folded them carefully once, and slid them into her scrub pocket like they were nothing. Like it was normal to carry paper in an age that pretended paper didn't matter. She logged out. She washed her hands again. At the end of the corridor, 2 men in plain clothes had appeared near the ICU doors. They weren't doctors. They didn't wear scrubs. Their eyes were not the eyes of family members waiting for news. They watched the gurney disappear. Then they watched the staff. And for a brief second, one of them looked directly at Lena, like he was confirming something. Lena looked back with the same calm she used on violent patients and grieving mothers and arrogant interns. No challenge, no fear, just attention. The man turned away first. Lena didn't move. Not because she was frozen. Because she understood what most people didn't. When someone starts rewriting a medical chart before the patient even arrives, the crisis has already begun. And in this building, under fluorescent light and layered bureaucracy, the quiet nurse they didn't notice was the only person who would not let the record become a lie. Lena didn't run toward problems. She let them come close enough to reveal themselves. The rest of the shift carried on like the hospital hadn't just tried to restart a stranger's heart in trauma too. New patients arrived. Old patients waited. A man in a business suit demanded pain medication with the confidence of someone who had never been told no. A woman clutched her abdomen and whispered prayers into her scarf. The ER swallowed it all. Lena moved through it with the same steady rhythm, triage notes, medication scans, vital checks, chart updates. To anyone watching, it looked like routine. It was meant to look like routine. But the printed audit trail sat against her ribs, warm in her scrub pocket, as if it had a pulse of its own. She waited until the hallway thinned and the trauma noise faded into the steady hum of the department. Then she returned to the workstation and logged in again. She did not open the chart immediately. First, she checked the cameras, only the feeds she was authorized to see. Hallway triage, the main nursing station, nothing unusual, staff moving, patients shifting. Then she opened John Doe's record. The false note was still there. Patient stable on arrival, no signs of restraint or foul play. It was written in a clinical tone, too polished, too certain. It didn't sound like the people who actually touched the patient. It sounded like someone who wanted the sentence to survive. Lena clicked the timestamp. She clicked the author. She clicked the audit log again. The entry showed an initial creation and then edits. Small changes, punctuation, a word swapped. Like someone was revising a story, not documenting medicine. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She could flag it. She could call the charge nurse. She could escalate to the house supervisor. She didn't. Not yet. Because escalation in a hospital was a strange thing. You could scream about a missing medication and the building would move. You could report a suspicious chart entry and get told you were creating problems. And Lena understood something else. If someone had access to the chart before arrival, they had access to more than one chart. So she went wider. She searched the system for recent audit anomalies, just the ones she could see within her permissions. She didn't need to see everything. Patterns showed themselves in small places. 2 other charts popped up with strange timestamps from the same admin login, minor, forgettable patients from earlier in the week. A man with chest pain, a teenager with a broken wrist. Edits that didn't change outcomes, just words, not clinical necessity, narrative control. She closed the search window and sat very still. Around her, the nurse's station sounded normal. Phones ringing, the rattle of a medication cart, someone laughing softly at a text message. The normal world humming along. Lena slid her chair back and walked toward the medication room, passing Miriam on the way. Miriam lifted her chin. ICU called, your John Doe's alive. Barely. Lena nodded once. Any family? None, Miriam said. And ICU says there were 2 men asking questions. No badge, but they acted like they had one. Lena didn't react outwardly. Did security log them? Miriam scoffed, tired. Security logs what it feels like logging. Lena's mouth tightened briefly, almost a smile, except it wasn't amused. Inside the medication room, Lena scanned supplies for a patient in bed 6 and placed the vial into a tray. Her hands were steady. Her mind was not. When she came back out, she found Dr. CID at the workstation, typing with frantic energy, his posture slightly hunched like he expected someone to strike him from behind. "Doctor," Lena said. He glanced up too fast. "Yeah." Lena kept her voice neutral, as if asking about a dosage. "John Doe's chart, did you see an entry in there before he arrived?" Dr. CID's fingers stopped moving. It wasn't a dramatic pause. It was a pause of someone deciding what they were allowed to say. "I don't know what you mean," he said. Lena watched his eyes. They moved to the side, not to her, toward the corridor, toward the ICU doors, toward where those plainclothes men had appeared. "Doctor," she repeated, softer, "your name is on the resuscitation note. The timeline matters." His jaw flexed. "This isn't," he lowered his voice. "This isn't our problem." Lena didn't raise her eyebrows, didn't challenge him openly. "It's our patient." He stared at the screen as if it could rescue him. "We did our job, he's alive. ICU can handle the rest." Lena let the silence hold for a moment. Then she said, "Someone wrote he was stable on arrival." Dr. CID swallowed. Maybe it auto-populated." "It didn't," Lena replied. Her tone didn't accuse, it just corrected. He looked at her then, really looked, and his face tightened with the kind of fear that wasn't about a medical outcome. "Stop," he whispered. "Just stop. You don't understand." Lena leaned in slightly, enough that her words didn't travel. "Who is they?" she asked. "Doctor." CID's gaze flicked down to her ID badge, to the word nurse in block letters, to the assumed limits of her authority. His voice was barely audible. "I saw a man in the ICU corridor, not hospital staff. He asked for the chart. He said he was with investigations. He didn't show me anything. He just," CID's throat worked. "He knew my name." Lena didn't blink. "When?" "While we were coding him," CID said, shame creeping into his tone. Like he'd been waiting for it. Lena straightened. "Did he touch the computer?" CID hesitated. "Not in front of me. Did anyone else access the workstation?" Lena asked. CID's eyes searched for an exit from the conversation. "The unit clerk, ICU nurse, I don't know, people were moving." Lena nodded once. She didn't press him further. She didn't humiliate him. She didn't make him confess something he wasn't ready to carry. Restraint was sometimes the only way to keep someone useful. She stepped away and returned to her tasks as if the conversation had been nothing, but her head was already mapping the environment. Who had access to the chart? Which workstations were shared? Which doors required badges? Which didn't? She knew the hospital's rhythms intimately. The shift changes, the vulnerable points, the moments when nobody watched because everyone assumed someone else was watching. An hour later, while she was documenting a medication administration, the John Doe chart refreshed. A new entry appeared. No evidence of assault, injuries consistent with vehicle collision. Staff advised to refrain from speculation. It was signed by the same admin login. Lena read it twice, not for comprehension, for intent. The sentence wasn't meant for medicine, it was meant for warning. She clicked the audit trail again. The entry had been added from a terminal location listed as ICU West Station 3. Lena's gaze lifted slowly to the corridor leading toward ICU. She didn't move yet. She didn't stand up and march down the hall. That was what they expected from people who panicked: noise, anger, escalation. Instead, Lena did something else. She printed again. This time, she printed quietly from a different printer across the station, one that wasn't monitored as closely because it was used for discharge summaries and pharmacy labels. Paper slid out with a soft mechanical sigh. She gathered the pages, folded them, and placed them in a sealed specimen bag from a drawer, clear plastic with a white label strip. Then she wrote on it with a black marker. Audit log, do not discard. Her handwriting was neat. Official, like she belonged to the system. She slipped the bag into a locked cabinet behind the triage desk, one that held controlled forms and incident report packets. The key was on Miriam's ring. Lena didn't take it. She waited until Miriam stepped away, then used her own access. Legal, permitted, routine, no theft, no drama, just procedure. Later, Miriam returned and found Lena refilling supplies. Miriam lowered her voice. "You're tense." Lena's hands kept moving. Someone is editing patient records. Miriam's expression shifted, skepticism first, then the heavy caution of someone who'd been in healthcare too long. Lena, Miriam murmured. Don't. Before arrival, Lena said. Miriam went still. Lena continued, calm. ICU West Station 3, admin login. Miriam glanced around instinctively. That's not possible. It happened, Lena said. Miriam exhaled slowly, as if trying to decide whether reality was worth accepting. What do you want me to do? Lena met her eyes. Nothing loud. Miriam frowned. That's not an answer. It is, Lena replied, and there was no arrogance in it, only control. If they want silence, we don't give them noise. We give them documentation. Miriam looked at her like she was seeing her for the first time, like she couldn't reconcile the quiet nurse with the clarity of the strategy. Who are you dealing with? Miriam whispered. Lena didn't answer. Because she didn't know yet. She just knew the shape of the threat. It wasn't coming as a gunman at the door. It was coming as authority slipping into a hospital system, into passwords, into records, into narratives, using the hospital's own compliance against itself. And Lena understood the cost of a changed file. A file became a story became a report became a verdict. People went to prison on paper. People died on paper, too, slowly, quietly, while everyone insisted the record said otherwise. Lena looked toward the ICU corridor again. This time, the plainclothes men were there, 2 of them. They weren't talking to staff. They were watching. And Lena felt, with a cold certainty that settled behind her ribs, that they were not waiting for the patient to die. They were waiting for the hospital to obey. By the time dawn began to pale the windows, the hospital had that exhausted, pre-morning quiet. The ER never slept. It only changed texture. The loudest chaos softened into tired voices and slower footsteps. People still came in heartburn, fractures, fevers, but the surge of night violence eased, and the staff moved like a machine that had been running too long. Lena used that quiet, not to relax, to watch. The plainclothes men remained near ICU West, drifting in and out of sight like they were part of the building. They didn't sit. They didn't use their phones. They didn't speak to each other much. Their attention stayed outward, scanning for who entered, who exited, who belonged. Lena kept her distance. She didn't stare at them directly. She did what she always did. She looked like she was working. She checked a patient's IV site. She adjusted a monitor alarm. She restocked saline in a hallway cart. And each time she passed the ICU corridor, she took in a little more. One man wore a dark jacket with the collar up, despite the warm air. He carried himself like someone accustomed to being obeyed. The other, shorter, leaner, kept his hands in his pockets and watched with a flat, almost bored expression, the way some men watched a fight they already expected to win. At 06:12, the elevator doors opened and a third man stepped out. This one was older. Late 40s, maybe, clean haircut. A thin scar along the jaw that looked like it had been earned, not chosen. He didn't look around when he arrived. He walked straight to the 2 men and spoke quietly. They straightened subtly, not fear, recognition. Lena felt the air change. Miriam was at the charge desk sipping coffee that had gone cold. When she saw Lena approach, she set the cup down carefully, as if preparing for bad news. "They're still here," Miriam murmured. Lena nodded once. "They brought someone else." Miriam followed Lena's gaze, then quickly looked away. Security is not for this," Lena said. Miriam's lips pressed together. "You sound sure." Lena didn't answer that. Instead, she glanced at the unit clerk's monitor. "Any calls from administration?" Miriam hesitated. "Actually, yeah. They said ICU wants an incident report finalized before day shift." They were insistent. Lena's expression remained neutral. "Insistent how?" Miriam exhaled, like they already knew what it should say. Lena said nothing. That was enough. A few minutes later, a nurse from ICU, Farah, pale and tie-tied, appeared at the ER doorway. She didn't come to ask for supplies. She came with purpose. "Where's the nurse from Trauma 2? Farah asked. Her gaze landed on Lena immediately, as if she'd been instructed. Lena stepped forward without hurry. "I'm here." Farah's throat worked. "They want you upstairs." "Who?" Miriam asked. Farah didn't say CID yet. She didn't say police. She said the safer word first, the one that made it sound like routine. "Investigations," she replied. Then, reluctantly, CID. Miriam's eyebrows lifted. For what? Farah's eyes flicked to the corridor, then back. They're saying they need her statement. Lena kept her voice even. About what? Farah lowered her tone. About the timeline, about before he coded. Miriam's hand touched Lena's forearm instinctively, a brief protective gesture. We can do this through hospital protocol. Farah swallowed. They don't care about protocol. Lena looked past Farah. The three men were no longer lingering. They were moving, down the ICU corridor directly toward them, not running, not rushing, claiming space. The older one led. The two behind him fanned slightly, one to each side, controlling angles. Lena noticed the small things, the way they kept their backs from being fully exposed, the way their eyes tracked cameras, not people. When they reached the ER threshold, the older man stopped, just short of the nurse's station, and took out a badge. He flipped it open once. Quick. Enough for the room to accept it without reading it. CID, he said. His voice was quiet. It didn't need volume. He looked at Miriam first, then at Lena. I'm Detective Inspector Raza, he said. We need Nurse Lena Qureshi. It wasn't a request. Miriam stood straighter. She's on duty. Raza's expression didn't change. This is urgent. You can speak with our supervisor, Miriam replied. Her voice trembled slightly, but she held her ground. Raza's gaze stayed calm. We already have. Lena watched that sentence land. It wasn't just about authority. It was about reach. Raza looked at Lena again. You were the nurse in trauma too. You were with the patient before he coded. Yes, Lena said. Raza nodded, satisfied. Come with us. Lena didn't move, not defiance, assessment. She glanced at the badge again, not reading it like a civilian, but noting what wasn't shown. No clear department name, no visible serial number. The lamination looked new, too glossy. Raza followed her gaze and closed the badge. His smile was thin. We'll be quick. Miriam tried again. She can give a statement here. We can document. Raza cut in smoothly. We're not here for hospital documentation. We're investigating a crime. The word crime changed the temperature of the room. Nurses who had been listening from a distance suddenly looked down at their clipboards. A junior doctor pretended to focus on a chart. The unit clerk stopped typing. Fear didn't announce itself. It redirected attention away. Raza's eyes moved across the station. We'll need access to the patient's records. Miriam stiffened. Only authorized staff. Raza turned slightly and one of his men stepped forward, producing a folded paper. We have authorization. He didn't hand it to Miriam. He held it up, angled away like a prop. Lena saw the top line, not a warrant, not a court order, a letterhead, hospital administration. Where is your hospital legal representative? Lena asked. It was a simple question, professional, not emotional. Raza's eyes narrowed, not in anger but in calculation. We don't need legal for this. We're cooperating. Cooperation has procedure, Lena said. Miriam looked at Lena, surprised by the steadiness. Raza tilted his head slightly. You're a nurse. Yes, Lena replied. And you're asking me about legal procedure, he said, as if the sentence was inherently absurd. Lena didn't argue. She didn't rise to it. She simply repeated, where is your hospital legal representative? For a second, there was silence. Not because Lena had won, because Raza didn't like being forced into silence in front of an audience. He spoke again, voice still quiet, but colder now. Nurse Qureshi, I'm not here to debate. I'm here because a man nearly died and we believe the truth is being hidden. Miriam flinched. Lena didn't. Raza continued, we need your statement, and we need you to stop tampering with records. The accusation was delivered like a scalpel, small, sharp, designed to cut without blood. Miriam's eyes widened. That's, Lena's gaze stayed on Raza. I haven't touched anything outside clinical documentation. Raza nodded once, as if he expected that answer. Then you won't mind coming with us. Lena's mind moved quickly. If she refused, they would escalate. They would create a scene, make her look obstructive, write it into their narrative. If she went with them blindly, she would be isolated, away from witnesses, away from hospital systems, away from the small protections of public space. She chose the middle path. I'll come, Lena said. Miriam's head snapped toward her. Lena raised one hand slightly, small, calming. but we do it here, in the consult room, with a hospital supervisor present. Raza smiled faintly. No, Lena's voice didn't harden. Yes. The flatness of her certainty made the unit clerk look up. Raza's smile faded. You don't get to set terms. Lena met his eyes. In this hospital, I do. That was the first time she said it, not loudly, not dramatically, but as a fact. Raza stared at her for a beat too long. Then he leaned in slightly, lowering his voice so only she could hear. You think this is your hospital, he murmured. It is. It's a building full of cameras and records can be corrected. Lena's expression did not change, but something inside her settled into place. Raza straightened. Consult room, he said abruptly, like the decision had always been his. He pointed down the hall. One of his men moved first, checking the space. Miriam's hand tightened on Lena's forearm again, quick and anxious. Be careful, Miriam whispered. Lena gave her a small nod. No reassurance. No promise she couldn't keep. She walked with them, calm in the center, as if she was simply going to explain a medication order. Inside the consult room, the lights buzzed softly. A small table, 3 chairs, a wall phone, a laminated poster about hand hygiene. The door clicked shut behind them. Raza didn't sit. He stood between Lena and the exit. His men took positions without speaking, one near the door, one near the corner, blocking angles, controlling the room. Raza looked at Lena. Tell me, he said, what you saw before he coded. Lena took the chair closest to the table, placing it so her back wasn't against the wall and her line of sight included the door. She didn't do it like a trained operative. She did it like someone who had learned to survive in closed spaces. Her hands rested on the table, relaxed. Her voice stayed calm. I saw a patient with injuries inconsistent with the report, she said. Raza's face hardened slightly. And I saw, Lena continued, his record being edited before he arrived. The room went very still. Raza didn't blink. Then he said softly, No, you didn't. Lena held his gaze. Yes, she replied. I did. And somewhere outside the consult room, the hospital kept breathing, unaware that a war over paper and power had just stepped into its walls. Raza didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He let the room do the work, the closed door, the men placed like furniture, the way the hospital's thin walls suddenly felt thick. He stared at Lena as if patience was a kind of mercy. No, you didn't, he repeated, quieter now. You're confused, you were in a code. You're tired, you're looking for patterns. Lena didn't argue, she didn't defend herself with emotion. She gave him something worse for a man like Raza, she gave him a documentable fact. I printed the audit log, Lena said. One of the men at the door shifted slightly, the first visible reaction. Raza caught it and turned his eyes toward him for a fraction of a second, a silent correction. The man went still again. Raza returned his attention to Lena. Printing hospital records is a serious breach. It's within patient safety reporting, Lena replied, and within my scope when I suspect tampering. Raza's mouth tightened. You're a nurse. Yes, Lena said again, steady. Raza leaned a hand on the table, close enough that his presence took up space. Tell me what you want. Lena's eyes did not drop to his hand. I want the record to remain accurate. Raza smiled faintly, almost amused. Accurate according to you? Lena didn't blink. According to timestamps. Raza held the silence for a moment, then straightened and walked to the wall phone. He didn't pick it up. He simply stood near it, as if reminding her that help belonged to him. You're going to cooperate, he said. You're going to tell me the patient arrived stable. You're going to tell me you saw no signs of restraint. And then you're going to go back to your station and forget you ever printed anything. Lena inhaled once, slow. I won't say what isn't true. Raza's gaze sharpened. You think this is about truth? Lena's voice stayed level. It's about a lie entering a medical file. Raza's eyes narrowed. You're making this difficult. Lena's answer was quiet. You are. A beat passed. Then Raza did what men like him always did when procedure failed. He shifted to consequence. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small folder. Not thick, not official looking. Just enough paper to make it feel real. He opened it slowly like theater. Nurse Lena Qureshi, he said, reading her name with deliberate clarity. Employed here 4 years. Good record, no disciplinary actions. He looked up. You like your license? Lena didn't flinch. Yes. You like your job? Raza asked. Yes, Lena said. He nodded as if he had found the lever. Then you'll understand why you should be careful. A nurse can be investigated. A nurse can be accused of negligence. A nurse can be blamed for a patient's deterioration. Especially one who decides to print audit logs and run around accusing people of crimes. Lena listened without interrupting. When he finished, she said, "You're threatening my livelihood to protect an altered sentence." Raza's smile returned, thin, controlled. "I'm protecting a case." Lena leaned forward slightly, not to challenge him physically, but to bring her words closer, more precise. "Then protect it properly." Raza's voice cooled. "You don't tell me how to do my job." Lena's gaze stayed on him. "I'm not. I'm telling you what happened in my room. A patient collapsed. We resuscitated him, and someone edited his record before arrival. That's the timeline." Raza stared at her for a moment, then turned his head slightly toward his man in the corner. "Leave us." The man hesitated, only a fraction, then stepped outside. The door clicked again. The one at the door remained. Raza lowered his voice. "You think you're brave." Lena didn't answer. Raza continued, "You think you're doing the right thing, but you don't understand how this ends for people like you." "People like me?" Lena asked. Raza's eyes flicked to her badge, to the title, to the assumed boundary. "Hospital staff, replaceable, easy to bury in paperwork." Lena let a beat pass. Then she asked calmly, "What's the patient's real name?" Raza's expression didn't change, but the air did. He didn't answer. Lena continued, "You came into a hospital and asked for a nurse by name. You didn't ask for the nurse from Trauma 2. You asked for me. That means you knew I was the one on shift before you arrived." Raza's jaw tightened. "We did basic inquiries." "You also said you spoke to administration already," Lena said, "before day shift, before anyone normally answers phones." Raza leaned back slightly, as if recalculating. "You're not as simple as you look." Lena didn't take the bait. "What is his name?" Raza's eyes hardened. "You don't need it." "I do," Lena replied, "because John Doe doesn't match the edits. The edits are specific. They're defending an assault narrative before anyone claimed assault." Raza's tone sharpened. "Stop." Lena didn't. "What is the file you're protecting?" That word "file" landed between them like a held breath. Raza's gaze locked on hers. "Where did you hear that word?" Lena held steady. "From him." For the first time, Raza's composure cracked, not dramatically, not into rage, but into something more revealing, urgency. He moved around the table and stood closer, invading distance. "He spoke to you?" Lena didn't move back, she didn't raise her voice. He said one word. Raza's eyes searched her face. "When?" "During the code," Lena said, "before he lost consciousness." Raza's lips parted slightly, then closed. He was thinking fast now. The threat had shifted, no longer just Lena's resistance, but what Lena might now possess. He turned to the door and nodded to his man. The man opened it slightly. Raza spoke quietly into the gap. "Call ICU. Confirm if he regained consciousness." The man nodded and left. Raza returned his attention to Lena. "You printed the audit logs. Where are they?" "They're secured," Lena said. "In your pocket?" "No." "In the nurse's station?" "No." Raza smiled without warmth. "You're making yourself look guilty." Lena's voice stayed calm. "I'm making myself hard to intimidate." Raza's eyes narrowed. "You think you're safe because you're in a hospital?" Lena answered softly, "I'm safer because we have witnesses." Raza looked toward the door. "Witnesses don't matter when the record says something else." Lena's gaze sharpened slightly. "Then we return to the record." Raza stared at her. Lena continued, "You want my statement. Fine, but we do it properly, in writing, with a supervisor present. And you provide formal authorization for record access." Raza's smile returned again, a fraction. "You're negotiating." "I'm setting a boundary," Lena replied. Raza's phone buzzed in his jacket. He checked it, eyes moving quickly over the screen. His face changed again, controlled but tightened. "ICU says he's unstable," he said, "and that he asked for his file." Lena didn't react outwardly, but inside the pattern completed. File, edits, CID before dawn, pressure, narrative. Raza slid the phone back and stared at her. "You're going to tell me what he meant." "I don't know," Lena said. Raza's voice dropped. "You're lying." Lena's answer was flat. "No." Raza leaned forward, close enough that his breath touched the air between them. Listen to me. If you keep pushing, you will lose your job, you will lose your license. And when they look for someone to blame for a death in that ICU bed, they will find you. Lena held his gaze, calm under the weight. Then don't let him die. Raza froze for a moment, caught between threat and the reality that Lena had just refused to play the game he offered. The door opened again. The man returned, breathing a little faster. "Detective," he said quietly. "Administration is on the line. They want this contained." Raza looked at Lena like a decision had been made. "Fine," he said. "We'll do it your way." He stepped back, straightened his jacket, and returned to the professional mask. "But understand," Raza added softly, "your way ends when I say it does." Lena stood, smoothing her scrubs as if the conversation had been a routine handover. Her hands were steady. Her face was calm. But as she followed them out of the consult room and back into the open corridor, she understood something with absolute clarity. This was no longer about a suspicious entry in a chart. It was about a system being used as a weapon, and she had just made herself visible to the people holding it. Lena did not return to her station immediately. That was the first change. To anyone watching casually, it looked like nothing, just a nurse stepping aside, checking a chart, pausing near a medication cart. But Lena understood movement inside institutions. She knew where people expected her to be and where they stopped looking when she wasn't there. She used that gap. While Raza and his men were pulled into a call with administration down the corridor, voices low, posture rigid, Lena moved in the opposite direction. Not toward ICU, not toward the nurses' station, toward the systems. She entered a small side office used for incident reporting and occupational health reviews. It was rarely locked. No one liked the room. It smelled faintly of paper and disinfectant, and the computer inside was slow, outdated, ignored. Ignored meant safe. She logged in using her credentials. Not admin, not it, just nurse access. Enough. She opened the hospital's internal reporting system and began an incident report. Not a complaint, not an accusation, a factual safety event. Time, location, patient identifier, observed anomaly in electronic medical record timestamps, potential risk to patient safety and legal integrity. She wrote carefully, stripping emotion from every sentence. No speculation, no blame, only verifiable facts. She attached nothing. Yet, she saved the report as a draft. Drafts triggered nothing. They sat quietly in the system, time-stamped, preserved. Then she logged out. She didn't print. Paper had its place, but paper could be taken. Digital records, once seated correctly, were harder to erase without leaving scars. She exited the room and nearly collided with Adil, a first-year intern, carrying a stack of lab slips with both hands. "Sorry," he blurted. Lena steadied the papers automatically. "It's fine." Adil hesitated. His eyes flicked behind her toward ICU, then back. "They're asking questions," he said quietly. "Who?" Lena asked. Adil swallowed. "The men, they came to the workroom, asked who accessed John Doe's chart last night." Lena nodded once. "What did you say?" "That I didn't," he replied quickly. "Because I didn't." Lena studied his face. He wasn't lying, he was scared. "They asked about you," he added. Lena's voice stayed even. "What did you say?" "That you were thorough," he said, unsure if that was dangerous. Lena placed the lab slips back into his hands. "You did fine," he lingered. "They told me to stick to what I know." "That's good advice," Lena replied. "Follow it." Adil nodded, relief flickering briefly, then hurried away. Lena continued down the hall, her pace unhurried. She checked on a patient in bed 9, adjusted a drip, documented vitals. She spoke to a family member, explained a delay, apologized without promising anything she couldn't deliver. All the while, her mind ran parallel tracks. Raza was trying to control narrative through pressure. She would control it through structure. At 07:03, she returned to the nurse's station. Raza was there now, leaning against the counter, speaking with Miriam and a hospital administrator Lena didn't recognize, mid-level, clean suit, eyes already tired. Raza looked up as Lena approached. "There you are," he said mildly. "We were just discussing procedure." Lena met the administrator's gaze. "I filed a preliminary safety incident report." The administrator stiffened. "You what?" A draft, Lena clarified. No alerts sent. Roz's eyes sharpened. About what? Chart access anomalies, Lena said, related to a critical patient. The administrator's mouth opened, then closed. That's not necessary. Lena's voice remained calm. It's required. Raza smiled thinly. You're escalating. I'm documenting, Lena replied. The administrator rubbed his forehead. Let's all take a step back. Raza nodded agreeably, the picture of cooperation. Exactly. We're all on the same side. Lena looked at him. Then there's no issue with transparency. Raza held her gaze for a moment longer than was comfortable for the administrator. Then he said, fine. He turned slightly, lowering his voice. But understand something. Once this leaves the hospital, it stops being clinical. It becomes legal. Lena didn't argue. It already is. Raza's smile faded. He stepped closer, voice still quiet. You're choosing a hard road. Lena answered without hesitation. It's the only one that keeps the record clean. Raza studied her then, not as a nurse, not as an obstacle, but as a variable he hadn't accounted for. You've done this before, he said. It wasn't a question. Lena didn't respond. Silence, used correctly, was more revealing than denial. Raza straightened. We'll need full access to the audit logs. You'll need formal authorization, Lena replied. The administrator shifted uncomfortably. We can discuss that. Lena turned to him. Hospital legal should be present. Raza's jaw tightened. You're very focused on legal. I'm focused on patient harm, Lena said. Legal follows. Raza's phone buzzed again. This time, he stepped away to answer it, his back turned. The administrator leaned toward Lena, voice low. You're putting us in a difficult position. Lena met his eyes. So is altered documentation. He exhaled. Do you understand who you're dealing with? Lena nodded once. Yes. That answer unsettled him more than ignorance would have. Minutes later, an ICU nurse approached, breath quick. John Doe's crashing again, she said. Pressure's dropping, he's agitated, keeps asking for paperwork. Raza turned back sharply. He's talking? Yes, the nurse said. Not clearly. Raza's gaze snapped to Lena. He's unstable. You want him transferred? No, Lena said immediately. The room stilled. The administrator blinked. You can't. I can recommend, Lena corrected. And right now, moving him increases risk. Raza stared at her. You're protecting him. I'm protecting a patient, Lena replied. Raza stepped closer. Or protecting a file. Lena's voice was steady. Those are not mutually exclusive. Raza held her gaze, then turned toward the ICU corridor. We need to speak with him. No, Lena said. This time, the word landed heavier. He's not fit for interrogation, she continued. Any statement taken now is unreliable. Raza scoffed quietly. We'll decide that. Lena didn't raise her voice. If you proceed, I will document it as coercive under medical distress. The administrator's eyes widened. Lena. That documentation triggers review, Lena continued, addressing Raza directly. By ethics, by legal, by external bodies. Raza's mouth tightened. You're threatening me. I'm informing you, Lena said. Raza stared at her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed once, soft, humorless. You really don't know when to stop, he said. Lena met his gaze. I know exactly when to stop, this isn't it. Raza leaned in slightly. You're not as small as you look. Lena didn't respond. She didn't need to. The shift had already happened. Raza was no longer dictating terms. He was reacting. And Lena understood the cost of that shift. When people like Raza lost control of the narrative, they looked for leverage elsewhere. She had protected the record. Next, she would have to protect the people. The ICU doors closed harder than they needed to. Not slammed, controlled, but deliberate. The sound carried anyway. A warning wrapped in steel and glass. Lena stood just outside the threshold, hands folded loosely in front of her, posture unremarkable. Anyone watching would have seen a nurse waiting for clearance. Anyone who understood pressure would have seen a line being drawn. Inside, John Doe's agitation had changed. It wasn't panic anymore. It was urgency sharpened by pain. His heart rate climbed again, monitors ticking upward with mechanical indifference. The ventilator hissed softly, each breath a negotiation. He's not settling, the ICU registrar said, voice tight. Sedation barely holding. Lena stepped closer to the glass, keeping her voice low. What's he saying? Fragments, the nurse replied. Paper, names, keeps asking who has his things. Lena didn't look at Raza when she spoke. He believes something he carried matters more than his life. Raza crossed his arms, or he's delirious. Delirium doesn't repeat a single word with intent, Lena said. Raza turned toward her fully now. You're speculating. I'm listening, Lena replied. Raza's jaw tightened. We need to speak to him. No, Lena said again. The administrator glanced between them, sweat beading at his temple. Detective, ICU policy, Raza cut him off. Policy doesn't override national security. The word dropped heavy into the space. The ICU nurse froze. The registrar blinked. National. Lena turned slowly to face Raza. Then you should have brought a warrant. Raza's eyes narrowed. We brought what we needed. Lena didn't raise her voice. You brought influence, that's not the same thing. Raza stepped closer. You're obstructing. Lena held his gaze. You're escalating inside a critical care unit. Raza's phone buzzed again. He didn't answer it this time. Instead, he made a decision. Prepare him, he said to the ICU staff. We'll speak now. The registrar hesitated. He's unstable. Raza didn't look at him. That's not your call. Lena moved, just half a step forward, enough to insert herself into the line of authority without touching anyone. It is, she said. Raza stared at her. Excuse me, this is a medical decision, Lena continued, and I'm invoking patient protection. Raza laughed quietly. On what authority? Lena's eyes didn't leave his. On documented risk, on duty of care, and on the fact that if he codes again while you're questioning him, your presence will be part of the record. Silence. The ICU nurse looked between them, torn. The registrar swallowed. The administrator said nothing at all. Raza studied Lena with a different expression now, not irritation, assessment. You're very comfortable standing in my way, he said. Lena replied calmly. I'm more comfortable standing between you and a dying man. Raza held the silence longer this time. Then he turned sharply toward the administrator. Clear the room. The administrator flinched. Detective, clear it, Raza repeated. Except essential staff. The ICU nurse looked to Lena. Lena shook her head once. Small, firm. No, Lena said. Raza's patience snapped, not into shouting, but into something colder. He turned back to Lena. If you continue, I will have you removed. Lena nodded. Then you'll do it in front of witnesses. Raza's lips pressed thin. Before he could respond, a junior ICU nurse stepped forward, voice trembling. Detective, he just said something. Everyone turned toward the bed. John Doe's eyes were open now, unfocused but present. His chest rose unevenly under the sheet. What did he say? Lena asked, already moving. The nurse swallowed. He asked if the copy survived. Raza went very still. Lena leaned closer to the glass, keeping her voice calm and slow. What copy? John Doe's gaze drifted toward her. Recognition flickered brief but sharp. Bag, he rasped. Locker. Raza moved toward the door. That's enough. Lena stepped sideways, blocking him without touching him. Locker where? John Doe's breathing hitched. Basement, old wing. Raza's eyes burned into Lena. Move. Lena didn't. The ICU nurse spoke up again, panic creeping in. His pressure's dropping. Sedate, Lena said immediately. Now. The registrar hesitated, then nodded. Sedating. Raza reached for the door handle. Lena placed her hand on the glass beside it, not gripping, not forceful, just present. If you leave with him mid-sedation, she said quietly, I will document reckless endangerment. Raza turned on her. You think documentation scares me? No, Lena replied. I think it slows you down. The sedative took effect. John Doe's eyes fluttered shut. The moment passed. Raza stared at Lena like she had just cost him something he couldn't afford to lose. You just interfered with a federal matter, he said. Lena answered softly. You just tried to interrogate a dying man. Raza turned away sharply and stepped into the hallway, pulling his phone from his jacket. He walked several meters away, voice low but urgent. The administrator sagged slightly, like someone whose knees had been locked too long. What are you doing? He whispered to Lena. Buying time, Lena replied. For what? Lena didn't answer immediately. She turned to the ICU nurse, who was assigned to personal effects intake. The nurse frowned. Security logs them. Which security? Lena asked. The nurse hesitated. Night shift, but the basement lockers, Lena nodded. I know. She turned and walked away from ICU without waiting for permission. Down the service corridor, past supply rooms and unused offices, toward the old wing that had never been properly renovated because no one wanted to fund something forgotten. The basement smelled different, cooler, damp, heavy with dust and old paint. The lockers were metal dented, each one tagged with faded numbers. Most were empty. Some held lost coats, broken phones, abandoned shoes. Lena stopped at one marked B17. It wasn't locked. She opened it carefully. Inside was a small hospital belongings bag knotted tight. Standard issue. Unremarkable. She didn't open it. She photographed the locker number, the bag, the surroundings, quick, precise, no flash, no noise. Then she closed the locker. Footsteps echoed behind her. Lena turned. It was Raza. It was Adil. He looked pale. They're pulling security footage, he whispered. They asked to access the basement. Lena nodded. They'll find me. Adil's voice shook. Should I? No, Lena said gently. You shouldn't do anything. Adil swallowed. They said someone could be charged. Lena met his eyes. That's how they keep people still. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded paper, not the audit log, a blank incident form. Go upstairs, she said. If anyone asks, you're late because a patient needed labs. He nodded, clinging to the instruction like a lifeline. When he left, Lena stood alone in the basement corridor. She felt it now, the weight, not fear, cost. She had crossed a line that didn't come with applause. She had inserted herself into something designed to erase people quietly, and she knew what came next. When institutions couldn't move the truth, they moved the blame. Her phone vibrated in her pocket, a message from administration. Access suspended pending review, report to HR. Lena read it once. Then she slipped the phone away. Upstairs, alarms continued to beep. Nurses continued to move. Patients continued to suffer and survive in equal measure. The hospital breathed, but the rules had changed. And Lena understood that the next choice would not be about paperwork or policy. It would be about whether she could live with what she knew and what it would cost to protect it. Lena read the message again only when the elevator doors closed. Access suspended pending review. Report to HR. No explanation, no signature, just a digital removal of permission, clean, immediate, effective. She slid the phone back into her pocket. The elevator hummed upward, indifferent. When the doors opened, the hospital looked the same corridors, the same smell of antiseptic, the same rhythm of movement. Nothing in the building announced that Lena no longer officially belonged in its systems. That was how institutions punished people quietly. She stepped out anyway. At the nurse's station, Miriam noticed her immediately. Your login isn't working, she said under her breath. I know, Lena replied. Miriam's face tightened. They're doing this fast. Yes, Lena said. They will. Miriam glanced toward the ICU corridor. Raza S. asking for you. Lena didn't react. What exactly? To clarify your statement, Miriam said, the word sour in her mouth. And HR wants you in 30 minutes. Lena nodded once. I won't be going to HR yet. Miriam stared. Lena, I'm not refusing, Lena said calmly. I'm prioritizing patient safety. Miriam exhaled slowly. You understand how this looks. Lena did. She understood exactly how it was meant to look. She turned toward ICU. Without system access, she couldn't open charts or log notes. She couldn't formally order anything. She could only act as a nurse in the oldest sense: eyes, judgment, presence. Outside the ICU room, 2 uniformed security guards now stood where Raza's men had been earlier. Not police. Hospital security. That was worse. It meant the hospital had chosen containment over clarity. Inside, John Doe lay sedated, machines breathing and thinking for him. His vitals were fragile but holding. A temporary equilibrium, bought with drugs and time. Lena stepped to the glass. Raza stood nearby, phone pressed to his ear, voice low. When he saw her, he turned away slightly, finishing the call. Then he faced her. You've been suspended, he said. Lena nodded. I'm aware. You're no longer authorized to be here, Raza continued. I'm not accessing systems, Lena replied. I'm observing a patient I treated. Raza's eyes narrowed. You're interfering. Lena's gaze stayed on the patient. He mentioned a locker. Raza's jaw tightened. You went to the basement. Yes, Lena said. Raza laughed softly. You just keep digging. Lena turned to him. You're not looking for evidence, you're looking for a container. Raza studied her. Explain. The edits to the chart weren't about injuries, Lena said. They were about removing motive. Whatever he carried wasn't meant to exist inside a medical record. You needed the narrative clean so the item could be dismissed as unrelated. Raza stared at her, saying nothing. You don't care if he lives, Lena continued quietly. You care if the thing he brought survives. Raza leaned closer. Careful. Lena didn't step back. You're going to search the locker. Yes, Raza said, with or without you. Lena nodded. If you do it without documentation, it disappears. Raza smiled. That's the idea. Lena looked back at the patient, machines blinking steadily. Then someone innocent will take the fall when this collapses. Raza's smile faded. You think you're the only one who sees consequences. I think you're willing to assign them, Lena replied. Raza watched her carefully now. You're choosing him over yourself. Lena met his gaze. I'm choosing not to let you choose for me. Raza stepped back slightly. If you continue, I'll make sure your license review becomes permanent. Lena felt the weight of it then, not as fear. As calculation, her career, her livelihood, years of quiet service reduced to a line item in an internal report, a narrative that would follow her into every future job interview. And on the other side of the scale, a patient who had walked into the hospital carrying something dangerous enough that multiple systems had bent to erase it. A young intern already shaking under pressure. A hospital willing to sacrifice truth for comfort. Lena spoke carefully. If I walk away now, what happens to him? Raza didn't hesitate. He stabilizes, he transfers. The record reflects an accident. And the locker? Raza's silence answered her. Lena closed her eyes briefly, not in defeat but in acceptance. Then she opened them. There's another copy, she said. Raza's head tilted. What? Whatever he brought, Lena continued. He wouldn't carry only one. People like him never do. Raza watched her closely. How do you know that? Because he used the word copy, Lena said, not original. Raza's expression shifted, subtle but real. Lena continued, you can erase the locker. You can erase the chart, but if someone else has it, the story returns. Raza's voice dropped. Where? Lena shook her head. I don't know. Raza stared at her, then glanced toward the ICU room. You're lying, he said. No, Lena replied, and neither is he. Raza exhaled slowly. You've put yourself in an impossible position. Lena nodded. That's what happens when you don't look away. Raza leaned in, voice low. Walk away now. I'll make this disappear. HR review ends. Suspension lifted. You go back to work. Lena looked at the patient again. Then at Miriam, watching from a distance, helpless and worried. Then at the security guards, stiff and uncomfortable. This was the moment. Not dramatic, not loud, just a choice. If you touch that locker without oversight, Lena said quietly, I will testify. Raza's eyes hardened. You have no standing. I have documentation, Lena replied, and witnesses and a pattern. Raza stared at her for a long moment, then he nodded once. Fine, he said. We'll do it clean. Lena didn't relax, with hospital legal present. Raza's jaw tightened. And if legal blocks it, then you wait, Lena said. Raza laughed softly, bitter. You're very comfortable with delay. I'm comfortable with restraint, Lena replied. Raza stepped back. You just cost yourself everything. Lena met his gaze, calm. No, I just paid for it. Raza turned away sharply, already dialing. Lena stayed where she was. She didn't follow. She didn't interfere further. She had drawn the line and accepted the price. Minutes later, Miriam approached quietly. HRS asking again. Lena nodded. I'll go after legal arrives. Miriam swallowed. You don't know if they will. Lena looked at the ICU room one last time. They will. Because now, the risk was no longer contained. Because now, Raza couldn't move without witnesses. Because now, Lena had done the hardest thing a disciplined person ever did. She had chosen restraint over escape. And whatever happened next would happen in the open. Hospital legal arrived without urgency. That was the first sign it mattered. 2 lawyers, neither in a hurry, neither apologetic. 1 woman in a gray suit carrying a thin laptop. 1 man older, glasses low on his nose, expression already tired of being summoned into messes created by people who didn't think paperwork was a weapon. They spoke briefly with the administrator. Then, with Raza. Lena watched from a distance, no longer part of the official circle. Security had not removed her. No one had ordered her away. That silence was its own verdict. When the legal team turned toward the ICU corridor, Raza's posture changed. His shoulders stayed relaxed, but his stance narrowed, like a man preparing to lose space. The woman lawyer spoke first. Detective Inspector Raza, we've been informed there are concerns about unauthorized access to patient records. Raza smiled politely. We're cooperating fully. The older lawyer glanced toward the ICU room. You're also attempting to interview a sedated patient. Raza's smile thinned. That's been postponed. Good, the lawyer replied, because that would have been indefensible. Raza said nothing. They moved together toward the elevators. To the basement, the woman lawyer said. We'll observe. Raza hesitated, just a fraction. Observation isn't required, he replied. It is, the older lawyer said calmly. If hospital property or patient effects are involved. Raza nodded once sharp. Of course. The elevator ride down was quiet. No one spoke. Lena stood at the back of the car, hands folded, eyes forward. She felt the tension, not fear, but consequence. Whatever was in that locker had already shifted power. It had forced legal oversight into a place Raza preferred to keep informal. The basement smelled the same as before. Dust, cold concrete, old neglect. Locker B waited exactly as Lena had left it. The woman lawyer gestured. Open it. Raza didn't move. One of his men stepped forward, then stopped when the older lawyer raised a finger. You don't touch it. The lawyer turned to Lena. You located this? Yes, Lena replied. Did you open it? No, the lawyer nodded. Good. He motioned to hospital security. You. The guard looked uncertain, then stepped forward and opened the locker. The belongings bag sat inside, plain and unremarkable. The guard lifted it out and placed it on a rolling tray. The woman lawyer untied the knot herself. Inside were 3 items. A phone, old, cracked, battery removed. A folded document sealed in plastic. And a USB drive taped to the inside of the bag, hidden from casual inspection. Raza exhaled sharply through his nose. The woman lawyer looked at him. Care to explain why CID is so interested in hospital lockers? Raza said nothing. The older lawyer picked up the document carefully. He didn't open it. He didn't need to. This will be logged, he said, and copied. Raza's head snapped up. Copied? Yes, the lawyer replied. Chain of custody. Raza's voice hardened. That material may be classified. The lawyer looked at him evenly. Then you should have arrived with a warrant. Silence. Raza's jaw worked. You don't understand the risk. The lawyer answered calmly. We understand liability. The USB drive was sealed into an evidence bag, photographed, documented, time-stamped, each step slow, deliberate. Raza watched control slip through his fingers, one procedure at a time. This hospital, he said quietly, has no idea what it's stepping into. The woman lawyer finally looked at him with something like irritation. This hospital has every idea, that's why we're documenting. Raza turned toward Lena. Not with anger, with something closer to respect. You knew, he said. Lena met his gaze. I knew you couldn't erase everything at once. Raza nodded slowly. You forced us into daylight. That was the point, Lena replied. Raza looked away. The items were wheeled toward the elevator. As the doors closed, Raza spoke again, voice low. This isn't over. Lena answered calmly. It never is. Upstairs, the hospital resumed its rhythm. HR never came. No one escorted Lena out. Instead, an email arrived an hour later. Suspension under review. Access restored pending investigation. No apology. No explanation, just quiet retreat. In ICU, John Doe stabilized. Barely. He never regained full consciousness before being transferred under guard later that day, this time with documentation, witnesses, and legal signatures at every step. Raza didn't accompany him. Someone hired did. Lena returned to her shift without ceremony. She relogged into the system. She completed her notes. She attached her incident report draft and submitted it. The system accepted it without comment. By evening, the plainclothes men were gone. Security returned to standing by doors, not blocking them. The administrator avoided Lena's eyes. Miriam didn't. She stopped Lena near the end of the shift. "They're not saying much," she whispered, "but legal asked who trained you." Lena shook her head slightly. "No one." Miriam studied her. "That's not true." Lena didn't correct her. When the shift ended, Lena changed out of her scrubs and placed them in her bag. She walked out through the main entrance like she always did. No cameras followed her. No one stopped her. Outside, the city breathed, unaware of how close a story had come to disappearing. Lena paused for a moment on the steps, not in relief, in acknowledgement. She had not won, she had prevented a loss, and that was enough. The hospital did not thank her. Institutions rarely did. By the next morning, the incident had been absorbed into meetings, memos, and quiet directives that never used names. The language shifted: review, process, oversight. Words designed to smooth edges, to suggest control where it had nearly been lost. Lena returned for her next shift like nothing had happened. Her access worked. Her badge opened doors. Her name appeared on the roster without annotation. On paper, the system had forgiven her. In the halls, it had not. People looked at her differently now. Not openly, not enough to be reported. A pause before conversation, a lowered voice. A glance that measured risk before friendliness. Dr. Saad avoided her entirely. Adil did not. He passed her near radiology, nodded once, quick, grateful, terrified. He said nothing. That was enough. The ICU nurses were polite but distant. They had seen how close the hospital had come to choosing silence over safety. They had learned something from it, and learning made people cautious. Miriam remained the same. She handed Lena a cup of coffee without comment and leaned in just long enough to whisper, "Legal asked for your incident report." "I submitted it," Lena replied. "They asked again," Miriam said. "Separately," Lena nodded. "Good." Miriam studied her. "You didn't even ask why." Lena met her eyes. "Because they're deciding what story survives." Miriam exhaled. "And what if it's not yours?" Lena's answer was quiet. "Then it won't be mine." That afternoon, a notice circulated. CID has concluded its ONSIT inquiries. All staff are reminded to follow documentation protocols. No mention of misconduct. No mention of altered records. No mention of lockers or basement wings. The hospital had chosen its public face. Behind that face, things shifted. An IT supervisor was reassigned. Audit permissions were quietly tightened. A new memo appeared about access review for administrative logins. Small changes. Enough to suggest concern, not enough to admit fault. Lena read the memos and continued working. She did not seek credit. She did not defend herself. She documented patients, not history. Late in the shift, hospital legal appeared again, not as a group, but as the older lawyer alone. He stood near the nurse's station, scanning the room like someone deciding whether to speak. Finally, he approached. "Nurse Qureshi," he said. Lena turned. "Yes." He lowered his voice. "The material recovered, it didn't belong here." "No," Lena agreed. "It's been transferred," he continued. "Proper channels." Lena nodded once. "Then it's no longer my concern." The lawyer hesitated. "You understand this won't be acknowledged." "I didn't expect it to be," Lena replied. He studied her. "Most people would." Lena met his gaze calmly. "Most people don't see what I saw." The lawyer nodded slowly. "That may be the difference." He left without another word. Near the end of the shift, Lena passed the ICU room where John Doe had been. Empty now, cleaned, prepared for the next emergency. Whatever story followed him had moved beyond the hospital's walls. She would never know its ending. That was not a failure. That was restraint. At the lockers near the staff entrance, Lena changed shoes and zipped her bag. She paused briefly, hand resting on the strap. She felt the weight, not of what she had done, but of what she had not allowed to happen. She had not chased power. She had not demanded recognition. She had not crossed lines she could not return from. She had stood in one place and refused to move. Sometimes that was enough to stop momentum. When Lena walked out into the evening air, no one followed her. No cars slowed. No calls came. The city did not know her name. The hospital did. And it would remember, not as a hero, not as a threat, but as a variable it could not easily control. That was the true aftermath. Quiet, Uneasy, earned, Lena worked a night shift the following week. No announcement marked her return. No supervisor pulled her aside to clarify boundaries. Her schedule appeared exactly as it always had, rows of names, blocks of hours, nothing special. That was deliberate. Hospitals closed ranks not with confrontation, but with normalcy. The ER was steady that night. Not quiet, not chaotic. The kind of shift where fatigue settled into bones, and people relied on habit to carry them through. Lena moved between beds, checked vitals, reassured families with measured words that promised care without false hope. In Trauma 3, a new nurse, young, careful, still learning how much silence mattered, watched Lena insert an IV with clean efficiency. "How do you stay calm?" the nurse asked quietly. "When things get heavy." Lena taped the line, checked the flow, and stepped back. "You do the next right thing," she said. "Then the next one." The nurse nodded, as if storing it away. Later, during a lull, Lena sat at the workstation and completed her notes. The system responded normally. No delays, no flags. The record accepted her entries without resistance. That more than anything told her where she stood. Miriam passed by and paused. "They reassigned the admin login," she murmured. "It audit." Lena nodded. "Good. That's it?" Miriam asked. "That's enough," Lena replied. Near the end of the shift, Lena stepped into the supply room to restock linens. She reached for a shelf and hesitated for just a moment. Behind a row of boxes sat something out of place. A thin folder, unmarked. She didn't open it immediately. She didn't rush. She closed the door, sat on a crate, and opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet. A photocopy of the audit log she had printed days earlier, her printout. On the bottom corner, someone had written a note in neat, controlled handwriting. "You were right to stop it." No signature, no explanation. Lena folded the paper once and placed it back in the folder. She returned it to the shelf where she found it and closed the door. When she stepped back into the corridor, the hospital looked exactly the same. Patients waited. Monitors beeped. Staff moved on. Lena clocked out at the end of her shift and walked through the automatic doors into the early morning air. No one watched her leave. No one followed. She adjusted her bag on her shoulder and headed toward the bus stop, another quiet figure among many. Inside the hospital, records remained intact. Outside, whatever storm had nearly broken against its walls had moved elsewhere. Lena did not chase it. She had done her work, and that was enough.